Hello and welcome to the Late Late Show with Dan and Grace. Hi friends, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm sorry we didn't release anything last week. We actually had a couple of messages from some people, a couple of people saying that they were sat down in front of the TV, cup of tea in hand, ready to go. Someone else was on their break, sending us a text, "Where are you?" So we're sorry, we're trying not to hold ourselves to too tight a schedule because of the baby, but we will try and get things out quite regularly for you because we want to give you something to enjoy in these trying times. But for this video, I'm actually going to be interviewing Grace, so you won't hear much from me apart from just questions and a couple of nods and hmms every now and then. So Grace asked you guys to send in some questions about her pregnancy during COVID specifically. So I'm going to ask some of the questions and then a couple of questions that I've thought are important that should be covered as well. So without further ado, please give it up for my guest, Grace McSharrys, and any noises in the background are of course from our resident baby. The first question for you is, what was your most irrational moment during pregnancy?
My most irrational moment? Do you remember when I threw all the cushions off the sofa?
Ah, yes, of course.
And it sounds crazier than it is, I think. Actually, I was quite uneventful as a pregnant lady. But this particular moment, we have a pillow back, large corner sofa, and I was feeling really pent up. I wasn't able to do boxing anymore, which I used to love before I was pregnant. There was nothing I could really do to get rid of my energy, so I was like, these things are soft, they're not going to do the room any harm, I'll throw them on the floor. And I did. I think I actually lay on top of them afterwards.
Well, what Grace does is she does this thing like you see cats do, where they sort of just like slowly push them off. So she was doing that. She wasn't like going crazy and chucking them at me on the floor. She was just one by one on the floor.
Yep. This is now the second video where we've referenced them being like a cat.
Yeah. There you go. I do actually have a picture of that post cushion throwing. I'll have a look at it, see if it's appropriate. Maybe we can put it on the screen now, depending on whether Grace wants me to. Okay. Any more? Any other things?
I nearly cried because I really wanted a panini and I couldn't have one. I cried because I watched a Disney film and I was really happy. I feel like that happened.
That happens regularly.
Yeah, I mean, that's not pregnant Grace really, that's just Grace. So, not much to report, sorry.
Okay, I'll move on to my next question. How much of your pregnancy was affected by the pandemic? When did you find out? Okay,
we found out on the 7th of February last year. So if you think back to when that was about a month and a half before we went into national lockdown. And we were kind of aware of the rumblings and that kind of thing, and we actually had a couple of weeks off of work, so by the time it came to me coming back to work, my boss actually said, don't come into the office, you're pregnant, it's not safe. And this was a month before national lockdown. So I actually have existed inside these four walls since February last year, and it was really hard because from the word go, pretty much my pregnancy was affected, because before the pandemic was in full blast, all that was really happening for me is, oh my goodness, this is surreal, and quite a lot of nausea, but not a lot of physical signs other than that. I was really blessed with quite a simple first trimester, I would say, and so it did feel like I was just in isolation for the whole thing.
So what key moments throughout the pregnancy were affected specifically?
Well, I think for both of us, the key moment was the first scan, wasn't it? That is a defining moment where I thought, okay, this pregnancy is not going to be how I imagined it, and I had to process quite a lot of pain, really. I rang up the hospital the day before. It was my 12-week scan. So yeah, officially you have 2 scans when you're pregnant. You have one at 12 weeks to check that everything's okay, and they do a bit of prediction of the size of the baby, check the heart, and then you have one at 20 weeks where they will tell you the gender and again more health checks, all that sort of thing. So this was our first scan, first baby, very exciting, very unknown. I have health anxiety as well, so for me going into a hospital, any time I do it is a victory. So to have someone alongside me to support me and ground me is almost 100% essential. And I rang up the hospital the day before to say, is it still okay for my partner to come with me? I know things are changing in some hospitals, and we hadn't by this point gone into national lockdown, I don't think.
National lockdown was March 23rd.
And our scan
And I'm pretty sure the scan was like April 3rd.
April 3rd.
So yeah, I was not at work.
But hospitals hadn't changed things just yet. We arrive at the hospital on the day, having checked the day before, and the lady just looks at me like, what are you doing? Why is he with you? And actually you felt quite stupid, didn't you? Because we were handled as if we should have known better when I'd made all the checks. And I had to just calmly be like, right, we need to respect what she's saying because it's not her fault. And I just had to walk in to the scan room by myself, and I just sat and cried. Very quickly pulled myself together, and I can only say that was God and people praying for me, feeling his peace. But Daniel had to sit outside having no idea what was going on. I was in a hospital with a lot of anxiety. I honestly didn't feel 100% present because I was dealing with everything by myself. I didn't have anyone to process things with. So I'll be honest with you, I barely remember the first scan. What I remember more is people, because I'd been isolated for quite a number of weeks by now, that I came out buzzing that I'd gotten to speak with, several different professionals and vent a bit of my extrovertness. But the reality was I got home and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed because we had gone in really, really excited and then faced a very deep disappointment.
Yeah. And Grace came home with a picture of the scan, as you normally do, a little printout, and she showed me it, and I don't think either of us really knew what to expect from each other because I didn't really feel anything. And I know that Grace was kind of not frustrated, but she wanted me to feel more, obviously, because it's our baby. But after we spoke about it, Grace obviously understood where I was coming from, and I understood where she was coming from. We just cried for a bit, cried our hearts out for a bit, and then we came around and dealt with it. But that was really tough.
Yeah.
Actually found out the gender the same way. Grace went into that scan, came out, wasn't allowed to take any pictures or videos or anything like that. She came out and told me the gender of the baby, which was weirdly anticlimactic and surreal.
Yeah. I actually asked the midwife to write down the sex of the baby without telling me, so that Daniel and I could find out together, but she wasn't allowed to. I don't know why. It's probably to do with the fact that they can't ever be 100% accurate, but I tried. Also, lots of people said, why don't you do a video call whilst you're in there? Also not allowed, so that's probably to do with legal reasons as well.
Was there any light through that process, any opportunity that we could share in any moments together during the pregnancy?
For sure. We had such a generous gift from a couple of friends of ours. They paid for us to go to a private scan, and it was honestly just one of the best days of last year, I think, because we went into this such a tiny little centre. I think they had 2 scan rooms where we got to see this little shelter, and they were really welcoming. Everything was so COVID safe, so you didn't feel like you were taking any risks or anything. And then it was like a mini cinema room, wasn't it, really? So you had the normal bed that I had to lie on and the scan machine thing. But then they had a projector and they projected the scan onto the wall. So Daniel sat holding my hand next to me and we got to see everything together for the first time. And he hadn't been able to be at any appointments with me before then. So it was so special.
Yeah.
And it was the first time that Daniel managed to feel connected to little P, which is what we called our baby at the time. it was such a blessing.
So for arguably the biggest part of pregnancy, your labour, how was that affected by the pandemic?
So my labour felt like a similar situation to the first scan, where I had checked to make sure my expectations were correct, and then suddenly things changed once I was in there. So because I had gestational diabetes, which is a weird form of diabetes that disappears as soon as you give birth, I was due to be induced as soon as I hit full term, so on the 40-week mark exactly. And I was told that I could have Daniel with me on the ward because of being induced, and then once I was in labour, he could be with me for that too. What they didn't tell us is that once we were in labour, it was only a certain amount of dilation that they would accept as officially in labour, regardless of how frequent my contractions were, and then they would let Daniel back in when I'd been informed that he'd be allowed to be there for the whole thing. So we go in on a Monday morning and Daniel's with me, and it's fine, and it's very surreal because I'm just being kind of bounced around people. I had to wait for a midwife to be available to induce me. We went in at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I think you were there with me for a couple of hours, weren't you? And they were just doing checks. They were just checking baby's heartbeat, my heartbeat, blood pressure, those sorts of things. And then they sent Daniel home because they didn't have anyone to induce me. Then at 6 o'clock, when Daniel's slot had finished, his visiting slot had finished, that is when I went into labour naturally. So I hadn't even been induced by this point, and it all progressed very quickly. I was having contractions very, very regularly. Water was breaking like no tomorrow, and I asked if Daniel could come and join me and I could be sent up to the delivery suite, and they said no. So I was having contractions about 2.5 minutes apart and in labour for 4 hours, just pacing up and down this room where 3 other ladies were just watching, and they kept calling the midwives in and asking them to send me upstairs because they were worried about me. They thought I was going to give birth on the floor in the ward rather than going upstairs to the suite. And so I just kind of soldiered on through without any painkillers for 4 hours, and no gas and air, and no birthing partner. Having done, what's that thing called? The Positive Birthing Company. I did hypnobirthing during pregnancy. But what you really, really need is a supportive birthing partner for any of that to work. And I didn't have anyone to talk me through breathing or squeeze a hand when the contractions were coming. And by the time I got upstairs, I was absolutely beside myself. And that was for 4 hours. And in this whole time, the midwives had kept saying, soon, soon. So Daniel didn't go home. He waited downstairs in the entrance to the lobby, just sat on the floor waiting. And by the time he got upstairs, bearing in mind he'd seen me early in the afternoon when I wasn't in labour, I was just waiting, and we played a game of Catan, and I was happy and jolly, and all of a sudden I was in the full throes of labour, sweaty, shouty, disgusting, beside myself, and he just had to deal with it. And I went from no painkillers, just wanting gas and air and wanting a water birth and all that jazz, to get an epidural in me right now. And then I had a 22-hour labour and a very traumatic C-section and about 3 infections and a very, very high heart rate for over 24 hours. And I don't think that is just because of the epidural. Epidurals can slow down labour, but actually I know a lot of women who during the pandemic have had emergency C-sections, and I do think it's because they have been traumatised or more uptight or more scared than they would have been if they had had the support they needed. And this is no reflection on the NHS. They could have not done anything else. I was on that ward for a long time, and there were so many women in there, and there was just no way that any of those midwives could have kept up with all the needs of everybody in there. But actually, if those women in there had had the support of their partners, then everyone would have been more at ease, the staff included.
So you went through most of your pregnancy alone in terms of scans, appointments, and the actual labour itself.
Yeah.
Since then, have you joined any support groups? Have you been able to keep in contact with people, or have you met any new mums?
Well, I've got some friends that are mums anyway, some really close friends that kind of just catch up with me and check that I'm doing all right and acknowledge how hard it is to be a first-time mum, and that alone makes me feel less like I'm on my own. I've joined a group, a weekly group for mums with babies under 6 months, so that we can just be honest about like what's going on and all that kind of thing, because it's a really weird time to have a baby. But that's over Zoom, and I don't enjoy Zoom at the best of times, and trying to do it with a baby, it doesn't work every week. It's a great place for support, but actually in the same way that pregnancy was affected, still, like everyone else, we're not seeing all the people that we want to see. Our baby has no idea what other children look like, really. He only knows his grandparents, which is wonderful. We are so thankful for support bubbles. But it feels like every part of the pregnancy was touched by the pandemic, and now his first year is fully being impacted. And for you as the dad as well, you need dad friends, don't you? Which you can go on a walk with dad friends, but actually we haven't been able to spend time with other families, and we have a lot of friends who have families that in normal times we would have spent time with and felt a lot more normal, but actually we're existing in these four walls, sometimes getting pretty annoyed with each other, dealing with a tiny baby on our own, and it is hard. And there have been amazing, joyful moments, of course, because, I mean, look at him. But like everyone else, the pandemic has made everything really difficult, and for us, being new parents is the current struggle.
Where did that light come from? So you and Finley missed out on quite a lot during your pregnancy because of the pandemic. So do you have any tips for people who are currently pregnant, who are expecting in the next couple of weeks, months, or for those who have given birth already, gone through a similar thing as you, but are struggling to process it?
That is a big question. I think for me, there is a balance that I didn't quite manage between cracking on and then acknowledging how hard it was. I feel like acknowledging how hard it was is happening right now in this video, so thank you to whoever suggested it. But the cracking on just kind of happened. I mean, I've always struggled with anxiety, so I was getting help for that during pregnancy, but in terms of dealing with the more extreme emotions of disappointment and trauma during my pregnancy and labour, I didn't deal with those at the time. I cracked on, and a lot of that was from hopefully a good place of actually everyone else is going through this pandemic too, and there are thousands of pregnant women also going through this, so we just need to suck it up. Like, this is the time that I'm pregnant in, so I'm just gonna trundle along. But then you do need to deal with your emotions to keep your head clear. So my advice would be to keep talking it out. Let yourself cry if you need to. Have friends that you can talk to about how it's going. And they don't just need to be mum friends. Like, you just need to share with other people to keep yourself sane about how you're feeling, how it's going. So be honest with yourself and with others, so that you're not pretending that you're better than you actually are. And I'm a Christian, so a lot of it is sometimes not even words to God, but hello, here I am, please help me, because I'm feeling emotional. And that's not really practical advice, it's just keep processing it. Whatever you do, keep acknowledging that you're going through something that is hard.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for answering the questions, and thank you for getting in touch as well and asking your questions. We really value it. We're glad that you care about this and you want to hear from us. We're glad to be of any help. We're really more than happy to share our lives with you. So please keep on sending questions in. We've got, as we've said before, we've got a long list of things that we want to make videos about, but please do send questions in. Any topics you want us to talk about, or any songs you want us to record, maybe any requests within reason. We'd love to hear them and we'd love to give them a go. So thanks so much for watching, and stay tuned as always for the next video, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel to not miss any future content. We're also on Facebook and Instagram at the McSharry blog. Take it easy.
Oh yeah, take it easy.